When we published my video on how to find the perfect partner using optimal stopping theory, we realised that you head squeezers, just like everybody else, need a little bit of help and advice when it comes to looking for love. But unlike everybody else, you also want clever, smart, scientific and rational advice. So let me be your maths matchmaker and tell you how to win at online dating. You might have heard recently about Chris McKinley, the mathematician who totally gamed the system. Now what Chris did was to write a computer program that was capable of tricking OkCupid into thinking that it was human. All Chris did then was set off the computer program to collect data on literally thousands of women across the site, all with the simple question in mind: what was it that the women who Chris was after, what was it that they were interested in? And once he'd collected that data, all Chris had to do was create a new dating profile that made him look as attractive as possible to all of his potential partners. Now, it took him almost a year to set it up, but in doing so, Chris changed his potential matches from just 100 to almost 10,000. And at his peak, his page was getting visits from up to 400 women a day. Conclusive proof, if ever it were needed, that maths seriously impresses the ladies. Now, OkCupid, I think, is a particularly interesting example, not least because it was founded by a group of mathematicians. And because they're mathematicians, the founders have been collecting data for almost a decade on how we interact with one another and how we speak about ourselves on an internet dating website. And they've come up with some seriously interesting results. For starters, it turns out that iPhone users do have more sex, or at least they say they do. But also, skinny women feel a lot better about themselves than curvy women when they're in their early 20s. But this switches over at age around 30, where curvy women overtake skinny women in the self-confidence stakes and never look back. But for me, my favourite finding from the group who founded OkCupid is that it turns out that how good looking you are does not dictate how popular you are on an online dating website. And actually, having people think that you're ugly can work to your advantage. Now, in one of the thankfully voluntary sections of OkCupid, you can rate how good looking you think people are between 1 and 5. Now, if we compare the average score that people achieve on this rating to how many messages they get, you can begin to get an idea of how good looking you are affects how popular you are on an online dating website. Now, the first thing to notice is that it's definitely not true that good-looking people get more messages. Maybe there's a little bit of a trend here, but let's be honest, it's got an R-squared of absolutely naff all. But the big question arises of what is it that's different about the people up there to the people down there? And it turns out that it's not about how good-looking you are, it's about how much you divide opinion. Let me give you an example. If you take Holly Willoughby, everybody agrees that Holly Willoughby is a very beautiful woman. Nobody thinks that she's ugly, but she's not a supermodel either. Now compare her to somebody like Sarah Jessica Parker, where a lot of people, myself included, think that she is absolutely fabulous and one of the most beautiful creatures to have ever walked the earth. But a lot of other people, i.e. most of the internet, seem to think that she looks like a horse. Now, if you ask people to rate Holly Willoughby and Sarah Jessica Parker on this 1 to 5 scale, I reckon they would average out to have roughly the same score. But the way that people would vote would be very different. For Holly, all of the votes would be clustered around the number 4, whereas for Sarah, you'd get a lot of 1s and a lot of 5s. And it's this spread, the fact that Sarah divides opinion, that would make her popular on an internet dating website. This spread is the thing that is important, and you're much better off dividing opinion in this way than just being beautiful like somebody like Holly. So if some people think that you're beautiful, you're better off having other people think that you're a massive minger. That's much better than having everybody think that you're just the cute girl next door. Now this begins to make a bit of sense if you start introducing a juicy bit of game theory, because the people who are sending these messages are perhaps thinking about their own chances. Let's say somebody thinks that you're very attractive, but suspects that other people won't be that interested. It means that they're going to have less competition, and it's an extra incentive for them to get in touch. But compare that to if somebody thinks someone's attractive but suspects that everybody else will as well. I mean, why would they bother humiliating themselves? But here's the really interesting part. Because most people, when they set up an online dating profile, they try and hide the things that they think makes them unattractive. So the classic example is people who are a little bit overweight choosing only a photo which shows their face, or perhaps bald men only choosing photos where they're wearing hats. But actually, this is the opposite of what you should do. You should totally play up to whatever makes you different, even if you think that some people might find it unattractive. The fact is that the people who fancy you are going to fancy you regardless, and the unimportant losers who don't, well, they only play up to your advantage. Now, if you can think of any other everyday practical problems that we can look at with science, then please do get in touch in the comments section below.